This episode is made possible by Roundel. Partner with Roundel and reach over 165 million people who look to Target for joy and also some inspiration. Together with you, they'll design curated media solutions that are a seamless extension of the Target experience, and everything is backed by unparalleled, unrivaled first-party data and measurement. You can learn more at roundel.com. Hello, everyone, and thanks for hanging out with us for the Behind the Numbers Weekly Listen, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Roundel. This is the Friday show that was talking smack about Blake on an episode earlier this week.
Good thing I don't listen to the podcast.
I knew that was coming.
Wait, who was talking
This is why
smack?
it's probably. This is why. Wow. Wait, you were there.
That's what I'm saying. I was there. I did not hear anybody saying
I'm going to
bad
say
things.
2 words: golf monthly.
Oh, right. Well, that's obviously. I'm
Susie
gonna
was
not
being
listen.
very mean. This is also
I don't even
the
know
show,
what that is. Golf Monthly.
See, that's the point. No one does. It's also the show that thought that because it knew how to restart a computer, that it should now unequivocally work in IT.
Not guilty.
We all need a
Everyone
backup
is.
plan.
Better than Gardner. All right, Susie. I'm your host, Marcus Johnson. In today's show, how do Americans get their news on social media? Are the movies dead yet? What to make of digital price tags from Walmart? IKEA to pay Roblox players to roleplay as employees? And where are the most visited countries and cities in the world? Join me for this episode. We have 3 people, all based in New York. We start with our Vice President of Content, who heads up our retail and e-commerce desk. It's Susie David Canyon.
Thanks for having me, Marcus.
Hello there. We're also joined by someone on that very desk. He is one of our senior analysts. It's, of course, Blake Drosch.
Hello, Marcus.
Hey, fella. And finally, we have our analyst who covers everything retail media for us. It's Sarah Marzano.
Hi, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, folks, we have 3 segments for you. We start with the story of the week. We play a super duper game for the second segment, and we end with some random trivia. Let's get to it. We start, of course, with the story of the week. How do Americans get their news on social media? There's an updated study from the Pew Research Center that shows social media platforms are an important part of the American news diet, with half of US adults saying they get their news at least sometimes from social media in general. So half of folks getting news from social media sometimes. Few other highlights from the study. I'll give you 2. 1, around 3 to 4 in 10, so 3 in 10 to 4 in 10. TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram users across the different platforms say news is a reason they use the platform, versus nearly 7 in 10 for X or Twitter users. And second one here, similar shares, 3 to 4 in 10 TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram users say they regularly get news on these platforms. The first one was it's a reason that they use the platform. The second one being they regularly get news on these platforms versus 5 in 10, half of X and Twitter users. So a couple of top line figures there. But Susie, I'll start with you. What interested you the most from this research about how Americans get their news on social media?
So, there's a few things, but I think what surprised me maybe the most, which is probably not the answer you were looking for, is that we talk a lot about how even social media platforms are politicized, but now when asked, even consumers recognize that there are some that are one-sided versus the other. And I had never seen data around that. So for me, that was really interesting. It's not just hearsay or our gut telling us, but it's actually people are noticing and talking about it. And so that also, another thing that surprised me was people realize that there is inaccurate information on these platforms.
Yeah.
But sadly, they're still turning to it, right? And so it's an interesting tension, I find.
Yeah. I want to get to the turning to it in a second, because the research seemed to suggest that maybe it's more, I'm here, oh, look, there's some news, as opposed to I'm going to social media for news. Either way, you're still consuming it. But the point about, that was something that jumped out to me. Most folks often see inaccuracies. It said 25 to 35% of users across the 4 platforms, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, and Twitter, say they extremely or fairly often see news there that seems inaccurate. And that number jumped to 70 to 85% of folks who said that these inaccuracies were there at least least they notice them at least sometimes. So yeah, I thought that was a really important one.
I think part of that too is because there were lots of different choices around how you're getting your news. Is it your friends and family's posts? Is it news organizations? I mean, there was a litany of them, right? And so maybe you notice a few more inaccuracies when it's not a news source. But then when it's a news source, for me, it feels sometimes very clickbaity, right? Like I think I know everything that's going on because I follow some of these major publications. But I don't really have the whole picture. And so like that's where it becomes very critical to be able to turn to actual media, full length media.
What do you guys make of this? Because that point jumped out to me as well. So the type of news on social media, you could argue it's different. I think you could also argue it's the same as what we've been consuming. Because the news folks get on social media seem to be, according to the study, less articles and breaking news and more people expressing opinions about current events and funny posts referencing news, which seems maybe different from how we get it. But then I was thinking, is this really that different from how we consume news on TV? Because a lot of cable news are folks expressing their opinions, and late night shows that often folks making jokes about the news. So it kind of seems like it's similar content, different medium, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That was something that really stood out to me about the article as well, as like the different sources for news across the platforms, with Facebook and Instagram indexing more towards you're hearing things from people you know personally, right? Whether that's friends or family or an acquaintance, and then moving over into like TikTok and X being different, like whether it's influencers on TikTok or actual journalists on X, and sort of mirroring like when you look at the trends of those who come to social platforms specifically seeking news, right? Like on X, that was the only platform where we saw well over a majority of users saying, we're coming here for news. And then they're getting it from media, journalists, like those reputable sources. So it's interesting how those things kind of like followed one another. Whereas it almost felt like on Facebook and Instagram, it's like you're using it despite having to hear about what your friends and family think about the news.
Yeah.
Well, it does mirror, I agree, like it mirrors real life sort of cable news. But at the same time, there were people, I don't know what the number was, but there were people in the study who realized that the algorithms are also telling you what to see, right? And surfacing the news that they think you would be most interested in, which is obviously what the algorithms are for, right? They want as much engagement as possible. So somehow there is like a mirroring, but not quite, of cable news, because ABC is deciding what you need to hear about, as are the late night talk show hosts.
Yeah. Blake, what jumped out to you, mate, from this study?
Yeah, I think that, what this study doesn't it sort of skims but doesn't get at the heart of is like, what are the types of content that people are actually like interacting with on social media, and what is like their perceived accuracy of the news. Like, it's always funny when you're asking people to, gauge whether or not that they deem the information that they're getting from social media to be accurate or biased or not, because a lot of people think that will label any type of news, whether it's legitimate or not, that conflicts with their worldview as somehow inaccurate or biased, right? But in terms of like going on like platform by platform, I think it's very interesting that, X has maintained its relevancy as like a news source, but I think that that's really because journalists and people in the media are still primarily using X, whereas more general consumers have probably moved away from the platform. But it's interesting to see sort of that number tick up on TikTok, and it becoming more of a source for cultural and political conversation. And I think that that's kind of an interesting insight into maybe where that activity has shifted towards, with the fact that a lot of non-media, non-journalist people have left X and are discussing it elsewhere. And I think that's can be indicative of what might be a potential headache for TikTok, either in this election cycle or or going forward, because at the same time, TikTok's also trying to grow and monetize very quickly, and an influx of political and cultural conversation obviously brings up a lot of brand safety and moderating issues. So I think that was a very sort of interesting takeaway to see that shift in where the conversation's happening.
But I also think it's part of it is the formats of the different platforms, right? Like Twitter is more words, and you can have these notifications, so it breaks the news for you. And if your notifications are on, you don't even need to go to Twitter to see, X to see what the news is, because you can just see it in your notification. Whereas the other three are much more image driven and or video driven, right? And so like that doesn't seem like the place you're going to go in the minute while you're traveling to figure out what's happening in the news.
I want to talk about news by platform for a second, just to end the story of the week here, because Blake, you mentioned TikTok, and they pop up in this data, which I find quite interesting, in how where people are going for their news is changing. Question being, how many Americans regularly get news from social media? It seems like it's pretty complicated, because by platform it changes, has been changing over the last couple of years quite drastically. So we can show you the data here. This chart showing Pew Research numbers on what share of US adults regularly get their news from social media in 2020, and then again in 2023. Since 2020, the share of folks who get their news on Twitter, the top of this chart, has fallen 6 points, along with the share who get, it's still in first place though, along with the share who get them from Facebook, news from Facebook, Reddit, and Snapchat. However, the share of Americans getting news from TikTok, Blake mentioned, is up 21 points, now joint second with Facebook. So it now goes X, Twitter, and then second place, distant second is Facebook and TikTok, joint second. But Facebook's been going down, TikTok has been going up. Instagram and LinkedIn also up a bit. The share of people getting news from YouTube was flat. So kind of up and down across the board, depending on the platform. But yeah, fascinating.
Guys, are we surprised that Snapchat is one of the places where people are getting news? Like, I don't even think I understand that one. You're getting news about your family, maybe, and friends, but are you getting world news from that?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's at the bottom of the list, but it's still 15% of people saying that they're getting news from there. But based on the types of news we were talking about, maybe more like opinions from friends that are news related, or funny comments which have a news angle potentially. All right, folks, that's it for the story of the week. Let's move now to the game of the week. Today's game, the Super Duper game. How does it work? 3 rounds. Today we have Fortune Teller, Move the Needle, and the Random Scale. The better the answers, the more points you get. Let's play. We'll start with Susie for round 1, Fortune Teller. This is where we predict the future. Are the movies dead yet? Esther Zuckerman of Vox thinks going to the movies isn't dead yet, writing that the post-strike summer was always going to be tough, that's last summer, but that there are lots of reasons not to panic. Noting first that this summer's movie season hasn't gotten off to the best of starts, with The Fall Guy and Mad Max prequel both struggling. However, Miss Zuckerman thinks that Inside Out 2, which pulled in 155 million in its US opening weekend, and Bad Boys 2, no, not 2, 4, they're on now, grabbed 56 million over its opening weekend. That they're both reasons to be more optimistic. But Susie, the question is, playing Fortune Teller, by the end of 2025, so by the end of next year, will the movie theatres be better or worse off than they are today?
So if you tuned in on Monday, then you know I am very excited about movie theaters, but I just think they need to be reimagined and be a little bit more immersive and a little bit more experiential. And I think the movies is similar to retail in some ways, right? Is retail dead? Is the mall dead? No, obviously it's not dead. We just have to rethink about how do we drive traffic. And it's the same for the movies. If it's a really strong movie, then you just need to figure out how do you differentiate the experience so people aren't streaming and they're ready to part extra dollars to come to the theater, whether that's merchandising, more PR. I mean, just think about Barbie and how there was hot pink everywhere, right? So I just think it's about reimagined, definitely not dead. It's such an old industry. There's no way.
Sarah.
Yeah, no, Susie hit on some of the stuff that this had me thinking about. But I think to answer the question, by the end of 2025, I mean, right now, and the article mentioned this, we're still seeing the impacts of the Hollywood strike, right? Movies that were supposed to have come out by now have been rescheduled. Some of them are even pushed to next year. But again, I think Susie's absolutely right. I think this had me thinking about how like the path to purchase for movies has changed and the way folks consume content has changed. in a way that's removed some of the urgency that would have historically driven, activity for like an opening weekend. And so I think movie theaters do need to evolve in order to drive that foot traffic. I think Barbie's a great example of something where there was a real social element to that movie. There were people dressing up, taking photos. It was like a real event to go to with other people. I think about things like Oppenheimer, where the draw was like, this is better than watching the movie in your living room, right? Because it's supposed to be seen on this big screen and with audio that you're not going to be able to replicate at home. Mm-hmm. And I think the article touched on the success of Inside Out too. And I think it's funny to think about that audience of kids, right? Where there is like that entertainment draw, and they are going to have that sense of urgency. So I think it's just really important to think through like how you turn things into an experience when you're effectively competing with the comfort of people's homes.
Mm-hmm. Like
the reason why Oppenheimer and Barbie did so well, I think, is those really hit the sweet spot of like movies that went on to achieve critical acclaim, but also had mass appeal. But I think it's also reminds me of another news story that we've seen recently, which is Sony purchasing the Alamo Drafthouse. And I think just more companies investing in that type of enhanced movie experience. It indicates that, yes, maybe the sizes of the audience might be getting a little bit smaller, but the industry is adapting to creating an experience that is going to enhance and get more dollars out of the audience that it still does have and is still interested in going to the movies, but maybe in a slightly different way. And I think that I think that still is a large enough audience that it can keep the movie industry successful, even as the dynamics shift.
It appears as though it can. I mean, Blake, you mentioned audience. I think that's one reason why it feels like the movies are dying, because maybe less people are going. But when you look at the data, it's suggesting a comeback. The dollars are up, even though it may not feel like it. Last year's US box office was $9 billion total for the year. That's up over 20% on the previous year. The problem is it's still 22% below pre-pandemic 2019 and 25% below the record, which was 2018. And then the history before that, like for a decade before 2019, it was kind of stuck at 11 billion from 2009 to 2019. So it is getting there. It's getting back to those levels, just not quite yet. This year, it has been struggling because of last year's writer's strike. If you look at the domestic box office from January to June 16th, so from January of this year to June 16th, and look at where it was the same time last year, it's down 24%. So whether it will be able to make that up in the second half of the year, possibly. Final point from me here, though, I thought this was interesting. In an inflationary climate, the movie theater tickets are the first to be cut. So this chart here shows that when it comes to the entertainment consumers cut back on due to inflation, movie theater tickets are clearly first to go, according to Morning Consult, as the top result here with 31%. A couple of points ahead of books in second. So given that we are still in this inflationary climate, it's double what it's been since, what people are used to the last 2 decades, but it's half of what it was 2 summers ago. And so it's still high, and that's the first thing to go, apparently, movie tickets. Let's move to round 2. We'll start with Sarah. This is Move the Needle, where folks tell me how much this story will move the needle out of 10. Talking digital price tags from Walmart. The retail giant will replace paper price tags with digital shelf labels, DSLs. According to a payments article, it noted that following a test at the retailer's location in Grapevine, Texas, the digital labels will be expanded to 2,300 stores by 2026. It's about half of its US store number. The labels are developed by Fusion Group and let employees update prices with a few clicks of an app. Walmart stressed the new prices will be reviewed daily and adjusted overnight. They won't be changed hour to hour. But Sarah, Move the Needle, how impactful will these DSLs, digital shelf labels, be out of 10?
I'm going to give it a 7. I feel good about this technology rolling out into Walmart stores. I mean, electronic shelf labels or digital shelf labels aren't a new technology, right? They've been around for quite some time. But what I like here is that Walmart has the infrastructure to roll this out, right? They have an internal employee app that can be used within their stores. And I think the utility for this technology is really high. And that's something that we see some tension with when it comes to the digitization of physical stores is both the infrastructure needed in order to roll out new technology at scale, but also thinking through solutions to actual problems that exist. And Walmart is really touting the efficiency and time savings these digital labels are going to bring to their employees who are otherwise spending a lot of time manually updating traditional paper tags with merchant price updates. But they also mentioned the utility for the LED lights that can flag where something is, whether that's for a product restock or fulfilling an online order. So I think there's a lot of sort of exciting utility for how this can make better use of the staff's time. I would just want to caution that this isn't a way to have fewer staff in stores.
Blake.
Yeah, I agree. I would give it about a 8 out of 10. I think that it's, it is easy to imagine sort of a far off future where digital price tags are the norm everywhere. And Walmart, certainly being a technological innovator in the retail space with the pockets to invest in an infrastructure, a digital, price tag infrastructure, is going to pay the dividends in the long term for all of the ways that Sarah already laid out. I do think that a lot of the sort of paranoia around dynamic pricing will be interesting to see how consumers react to it. But I will ultimately lean in Walmart's favor because they have a great reputation with their customer in offering like everyday low prices. And I don't think that this will be taken the wrong way, such as, what we saw with the Wendy's incident when they introduced dynamic pricing. So it'll be, interesting for sure.
I think there's a way to sort of or it's very easy to sort of imagine how this could also become something that has customer facing utility, right? When you think about those, the light up tags, where you can quickly find something. I the amount of times I've been in a grocery store looking for something that should be obvious and wandered up and down 5 aisles before coming across it. So you could see them rolling out some of this functionality as a way to make it easier for consumers to shop in store, which I think would, shift the pendulum more in the favor of consumers. But I think you're right, sort of flag the dynamic pricing piece.
So what Sarah's talking about, it's not just a price tag, it's also stock to light, it's called feature.
Yes.
Flashes an LED light on the shelf tag showing employees locations that require attention or restocking. But then also there's pick to light, which is a feature that speeds up the picking process by guiding employees, maybe customers, to the items needed. Susie, what you got for us?
So I would give it a 10 actually, because
Whoa.
I really think having come from a department store, I think it's not just about the tags on the shelf, but also all the signage. Sarah said it's not new in Canada. We've had it for a long time. In Kohl's, they have it. And I was trying to figure out when they launched it. And the earliest I could find, and so it might be even earlier than that, was 2013. And for Kohl's, it started on the running shoes. I remember all the running shoes are tagged, but now it's also signage. And in addition to everything everybody has said, there are a lot of lost opportunities when it's the wrong sign or the wrong price on an item and you go to point of sale and now you have to sell it at whatever that tag is, even if it's wrong, because you have to honor the price. So I think all the efficiencies that we've talked about, plus making sure that you're selling the right product at the right price at the right time. And I'm not even talking about dynamic pricing. I'm just talking about regular merchandise in the store. Plus, I would add for some places during some events, like trying to get ahead of Amazon Prime or a one-day sale or trying to do a Black Friday special, just think about how easy it would be to have these digital signages that are urgency, right? This is only going to be $3 for the next 3 hours. And then with the flip of an app, you can bring it back to the regular price or a different price. And it'll be so much more efficient for everybody.
Mm-hmm. I was listening, but I also noticed if I get I look a bit like an elephant.
Marcus,
Right?
come on.
I was mostly listening, but I did notice
Which
that.
one of us did you stop paying attention to and notice that?
To decide.
Susie.
Obviously.
Really quick though,
That was
Susie.
an obvious one because
Do you
clearly
think that-
I will never win, so he doesn't need to listen.
Do you It's half true. Do you think that people, consumers, to Blake's point, are going to be paranoid that prices are changing, hour to hour, and wait a second, that was this, but now it's that? Or do you think that they're going to appreciate, kind of to what you were suggesting, that that retailers can say, in the morning, get down here in the afternoon, we are going to be discounting this, that, and the other. Do you think they'll appreciate that kind of hour to hour or morning to afternoon fluctuation?
I think we have to give retailers some credit that they've understood dynamic pricing is not a positive experience. And so it's not like when you're booking a flight, right? Where depending on the time of day and how many people are looking at it's just a completely different process, especially because when you're buying things in a store, for the most part, they're like one of many, versus on a plane, there's 100 seats, right?
Yep. Yeah. To hammer the point home that you all kind of touched on in terms of time saved, Walmart stores have 120,000 products on the shelves, and they make thousands of pricing updates every week. Price changes, they say, used to take 2 days, could now be done in a couple of minutes. So that's the difference that these potential difference these digital shelf labels could make. Let's move to round 3. Susie just out in front by a point. 5 to Sarah and Blake with 4 apiece. We'll see if that's how the game ends. Final round. Round 3 is the random scale. We'll start with Blake. Folks have to tell me about the chances of something happening using the random scale. We're talking about IKEA paying 10 Roblox players to role play as employees in its virtual store. This is an article from Wes Davis of The Verge. He explains that IKEA will pay these folks $16 an hour to work in the Co-worker game, a virtual version of its IKEA store in Roblox, helping virtual customers find virtual furniture. You have to be 18 and older to apply for one of the 10 virtual store employee positions and live in the UK or Ireland. Interviews were held earlier this week, and the Co-worker game launches this coming Monday, June 24th. But we're playing the random scale. The question is, will other retailers follow suit? From the scale this week, from lowest to highest, is: first, this is madness. Second, this might work for some. Third, most retailers will be doing this within a few years. And fourth, we've got get on board. This is the future. Blake.
Go 1 or whatever the lowest chance of anybody else doing
this. Is madness?
Well, you're giving me a scale on like the chance. You asked what are the chances of it happening, and this is madness. It's not a prediction. I don't really understand what we're doing here.
What do you mean you don't understand? We could have had this conversation before the episode. This is madness means this is madness.
Doesn't make any sense.
This is will other retailers follow suit? And you're basically saying no. This is madness.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's the lowest one. Explain yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I just think it's kind of like a one-off, nice marketing gimmick, but I don't think it's like going to be so revolutionary that other retailers are going to feel like they have to do it. Will there be other ways in which that retailers will have other marketing experiences in the metaverse or on Roblox? Like, yeah, sure, but I think that this particular example is kind of just like a little fun splash in the pan, but it's not going to be anything revolutionary.
Blake's out. Susie.
So I obviously am going to answer your question in a different way. For this particular idea of are other retailers going to put up fake real stores in Roblox? No, this is madness, right? To Blake's point.
This is madness. Okay.
IKEA, though, is pretty much ahead of an AR, VR. I mean, they have scan and go technology in some of their stores in some countries. I think if anybody was going to try this gimmicky thing, IKEA is a good place to start. And they've really gamified it. I think they understand how to use Web3, also known as the metaverse, but I prefer calling it Web3 because of Meta. But anyways, so I digress. So I think in the will we see fake real stores? No, obviously not. Do I think retailers need to get on board? This is the future and they need to think of immersive experiences? Yes. So for that, I think you just have to be authentic and do something that makes sense and rings for your consumers. So if you are a company that has a target market of 85 plus year olds, maybe not the best place to be, right? But if your target market is a younger customer and you're not using these immersive experiences, you're going to lose out.
Did you just answer with the lowest and the highest options at the same time?
Yeah, because as Blake pointed out, actually,
madness,
I take that back
board.
Because I want to win. Because I want to win, I take it back.
No chance at this point. No.
Blake did not point out that your question was poorly phrased.
It wasn't. Hey, don't attack the question. It was written.
But we both answered it in the same way. He also said,
Blake picked madness. You picked madness, but this is also the future.
No, Blake picked madness, but of course people are going to have to use metaverse.
No, that's not what I said.
That's not what I said too.
I'm not going to put Sarah on the spot, but we all know that's exactly what Blake said. There is replay available.
Sarah, no pressure to answer that. Okay.
Yeah,
we don't. What's this? The NBA Finals? We don't. You can't call for.
There is replay to answer that.
Challenge flag. Sarah, you're up. God knows what Susie just said.
I landed somewhere between this is madness and this might work for some. Like, I think this isn't the first retailer activation on Roblox. I know 100% more about Roblox than I did a few hours ago after reading about this. I think what I would question, I think, Susie, you said something to the effect of like retailers going to have to figure out like what works for them and their customers. Like, what was really madness or bizarre to me about the IKEA activation is it seems to be sort of a PR stunt around their career track. So like I actually copied something from their website. It says gives players the opportunity to experience IKEA's unique approach to careers where non-linear career journeys are the norm. Like, I've never wondered what it would be like to work at an IKEA. I don't know how much draw this is going to have. I don't necessarily associate IKEA with a place that is easy to get help from an employee, whether there are many employees. So I'm curious if like this is going to be it for IKEA, right? Like, are people that excited to know what it would be like to work at IKEA is what I would call into question.
Very nice. Finally, someone who actually knew how the game was played. That's the end of the game. Let's count the scores. This week's winner, Susie! Somehow.
How did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. My question exactly. Susie was 7, Sarah and Blake were 6 apiece. You didn't really know how to answer the question, but your answers are really good. So congratulations, you're the winner. You get the championship belt.
That's all I care about.
And the last word.
Not interested. Just
good.
Just the championship belt, because I know nobody wants to talk about my basil. I have replaced my tomatoes with my basil.
Okay,
I want to talk about your basil more than people want to hear me talk about it. Sorry.
Please don't encourage it, Sarah. You won't be invited back on. All right, let's move on before Susie can move the camera and show us her miniature garden, which doesn't really exist. What are we talking about now? It's time for dinner party data. This is the part of the show where we tell you about the most interesting thing we've learned this week. We start with Susie, because she won.
Are you guys ready?
Probably not.
Today is the solstice. It is also almost my birthday, but more importantly, did you like that? More importantly, it's National Selfie Day. And so for retailers, that means a lot in terms of Instagrammable moments. And we've been talking about it too, right? Having immersive spaces. But do you know when the selfie became popular?
Too recently.
It does feel like that, right? 15 years ago in 2010.
My gosh.
Right? It was the word of the year in 2013, which also feels like it was a very recent addition to our vocabulary. And 2014 was the year of the selfie. 4% of photos taken are selfies. And people spend, on average, 54 hours a year taking selfies. And the most popular selfie, I have lots of stats.
Per person?
54 hours a year taking selfies.
Whoa. 54 hours. 2 full days worth of time taking selfies.
Throughout the year. Throughout 365 days.
Per person. Per capita person. Good.
I guess, yes, that is exactly right. Do you know where the most, like, it was a rundown of fun selfie stats, so I have to get back to you on where this particular selfie stat came from. But I will slack you.
Apple.
After I had to turn my computer on and off so that my mic would work, I lost the page. Otherwise, I would be able to tell you right away.
And she wants to work in IT. Go on.
I have a lot of other ones, but do you know what is the most popular selfie destination?
As in, like
where to put them?
No, sorry, where to take your own selfie.
In the house, in the garden, or do you mean like location in the world?
Location in the world.
Oof.
The Eiffel Tower.
Oh, he found my study.
That was a guess.
He found my study. Yes, the Eiffel Tower. And 34% of people post no selfies every day, but there is nearly half of people who post 1 to 3 selfies every day on some social platform. We are not those people, clearly, but it's happening.
Check my Instagram for multiple selfies.
Are you on Instagram?
Maybe.
I'm going to start following you.
No.
And send you pictures of my basil.
You won't be able to find me. I have an
Secret.
alias. Yeah.
Oh.
It's my middle name. All right, let's move on. I'd say very nice, but that was
Very
tragic.
Informative.
It was painful. Sarah, you're next.
Yeah, mine, I'm proud of myself because I think it takes us back to one of our stories at the top, but there's an anti-sunscreen movement on TikTok that is like taking hold among younger consumers. So I heard about this on the radio this morning, and I looked it up, and there's a study from the Orlando Health Cancer Institute that found that 1 in 7 adults under 35 thought that daily sunscreen use is more harmful to the skin than direct sun exposure.
Why?
And 23% thought drinking water and staying hydrated would somehow prevent sunburn. So be careful where you get your news.
Wait, why? Any reason? Why? Any explanation?
Sorry, I didn't go that deep on it,
That's
but
okay.
there's influencers preaching the harmful effects of the harmful effects of sunscreen, and people are listening.
It must be all those chemicals. You know how there was this moment in time, or even like ABC, like the morning shows were talking about what to look out for from an ingredients perspective. But how did it go from watch out from these ingredients to never apply sunscreen? Nuts.
Yep.
Wear sunscreen.
It's upsetting.
Good God. Blake.
So I, for some reason, I don't remember what it was now, was doing some research on the origin of fruits and vegetables last week.
My garden.
Busy?
That had nothing to do with it. So I found some really interesting things in terms of like where different, like the native origins of different types of like fruits and vegetables. For example, these are the 3 that kind of were most surprising to me. Is that citrus is not native to South America. It's native to the continents of Asia and Australia. And potatoes are not native to Europe. We would associate, potatoes with Ireland.
Well,
They're actually from North America. And then tomatoes, surprisingly enough, originated in South America, Mexico, and Central America, which was also surprising because, while you would think about tomatoes in terms of, South American cuisine, you would also think of that in like Italian cuisine. And a lot of the exchange of fruits and vegetables came from what is known as the Columbian Exchange, which was the widespread transfer of plants, animals, precious metals, commodities, culture, human populations, technology, diseases, and ideas between the New World in the Western Hemisphere and the Old World in the Eastern Hemisphere in the late 15th and following centuries. So it's a whole topic about how different types of plant species transferred, beginning obviously in like the colonial era. And it's very interesting because if you think about the fact that, limes, for instance, are not native to North America, considering how much, we associate things like Mexican food with limes, or potatoes. We relate to the, potato famine in Ireland, but they're not native of there. I just thought it was very interesting.
I think we need to have a conversation about how you're spending your free time, Blake.
You don't think that's interesting?
No. I'll be in New York next week. We'll go out.
I'm not going to
Maybe
be
outside.
Okay.
Sorry. Convenient. Yes, you are.
No, I'm not actually.
All right, fine. Never mind. Just
Well,
myself then.
Sarah and I will go out with you and talk about...
Moving on. Okay, I've got one for you real quick. The most visited places in the world. In 2023 alone, global inbound tourist arrivals reached 1.3 billion, writes Bruno Venditti of Visual Capitalist. But that's still 88%, just 88% of pre-pandemic levels. Arrivals to China being half of what they were is a big reason for that. But yeah, still not reached pre-pandemic, but more and more people are traveling. We'll turn this into a quick game. I've got 2 questions. Whoever picks the country or the city with the highest number of tourists wins. We'll do country first. The most visited country in the world. We'll start with Sarah, Susie, then Blake. The most visited country in the world in 2023, according to the World Tourism Organization, was
France.
Okay, never mind. No need to play the game. France is true. Yep. 100
Wait,
million.
I was going to say Armenia.
Wait, can I win? Do I win now?
Yeah, you won. Yeah. There's no reason. Yeah. I should have just said shout out because that didn't work at all. How I expected it
because
to.
now I didn't get to say Armenia.
No. France
go
is number 1. Anyone want to get a Blake? Susie, can you guess 2 or 3? What other countries are up there? Italy's 4th. Close. Nearly half of that of France in terms of tourists.
I feel like England is probably a big one.
That's actually quite high considering such a small country. 7th.
Oh.
Portugal.
Portugal, no. Spain, number 2. So France, 100 million. Greece is 10th. France, 100 million. Spain, 85 million. The US, 67 million. Then Italy and Turkey round out the top 5. Let's go. The most visited city, we'll just say shout out in the world 2023 World Tourism Organization.
I mean, it has to be Paris.
Paris is 5th. This is according to Euromonitor International.
Oh, this is a different
from
source.
2023. Yes.
Barcelona.
Barcelona, no. So Paris is 5th. Barcelona, no.
Rome. And the Vatican.
No. Blake, any guesses?
Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah. Haven't we had this conversation before?
Nope.
New York.
New York is on here 8th place.
Jesus.
So I will give you the top 3. It's Istanbul. 20 million, just over 20 million.
Is Yerevan next?
Is one more time?
Yerevan, capital of Armenia?
No. Okay, we're there again. No, still no. London is 2nd with 19 million. Dubai with 17 million. Antalya, surprised me, in Turkey again, 16 million. Paris with 15. And then it goes Hong Kong, Bangkok, New York, Cancun, and Mecca.
Cancun?
Right after New York.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right, folks, that's all we've got time for today's episode. Thank you so much to my guests. A huge thank you, of course, to Sarah.
Thanks for having me. I'm upset I didn't win.
I can hear it in your voice. Thank you to Blake.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, equally as disappointed. And thank you to Susie.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me.
Too much. Dial it back. She won this week's Game of the Week. Thanks to Victoria, who edits the show, Stuart, who runs the team, Sophie, who does our social media, Lance, who runs our video podcast, and to everyone for listening in. We hope to see you on Monday for the Behind the Numbers Daily. That's an eMarketer podcast made possible by Roundel. Happiest of weekends.